Sam is a certified financial planner who specializes in personal financial wellness. She works day to day as a financial wellness coach to help others develop skills and tools to feel self-empowered in building a financial life that's both sustainable and compatible with their own values and desires. So with that, Sam, take it away.
Oh, no, thank you for that. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen now, and then we kind of get to who am I actually, and what we'll be doing today. All right. So I'm really excited for this financial literacy workshop. I have some information up here. My pronouns are she, her. As Haley said, I'm a financial consultant and money coach. I have worked historically in the nonprofit and higher education industries. I really enjoy it because I think you work with people from all different backgrounds, and I really enjoy learning from different experiences to make me a better coach. The reason why I love what I do and why I feel like money, I really have loved my passion for money coaching is because like many millennials and people younger than me, I have direct experience in money struggles, living paycheck to paycheck. I was the kind of person that fell into this industry. I was the girl who avoided all math classes in college and still walked out and still managed to graduate. I found the perfect strategy to make sure I didn't have to take calculus. And so with that though, I felt and I think a lot of that came from my own belief that I was inherently bad with math, so I was going to be bad with money, and I feel like a lot of us might feel like that. And so what I've always thought is like, if I can do it, so many other people can. And the thing about personal finance and financial literacy, it's stuff that you need for the rest of your life. It's not just like this time and period. The sooner you learn it, the longer you'll be able to enjoy it. But one thing I have learned though, is that while financial literacy education is available to most people, it's not always attainable for everyone. So I enjoy experiences like that, to where I get to speak to people, especially in this virtual platform, on a larger scale. So hopefully you can take away something today that's you're going to be able to apply to your daily life. But just a couple of reminders and disclosures, just get the legal jumbo out. While I am a certified financial planner professional here, I am this presentation and nothing in it constitutes as financial advice, right? Because financial advice is given based on unique circumstances and taking into account your own risk and preferences. So it would be impossible for me to provide suitable advice to you through this kind of platform. And then personal finance, super subjective topic. As I said, that's why personal finance advice is given based on unique circumstances. Like they say, everyone on Reddit thinks they're an expert. And so, it's hard to be an expert in this industry because there is no right, wrong answer. There's only what works for you. And that's kind of people hate hearing that. It's a very gray, personal finance is a very gray area. So what I want to review real quick is just the agenda for today. It's simple. We're covering 3 themes. And we have our first one is going to be based off of budgeting. I say budgeting, even though I hate the word. I commonly use the word money plan, but I do use budget in this presentation just so you guys can understand where I'm coming from and what that means. I feel like budgeting sometimes can come off as a negative connotation just due to it sounds restrictive, which it doesn't need to be. And so just while I say budgeting a lot, I don't necessarily like to use that term. But anyway, the first part is going to be focused on, outlooks on saving, cash flow management, different types of spending, and how it all can align with your own personal values and goals, and how finding a sustainable relationship with money over time stems from your ability to really kind of map it back to who you are and why you're doing it. We're going to then spend some time on debt management, repayment strategies, student loans, as well as those credit cards and what to do and what to not to do about them. I know everyone, has a different philosophy when it comes to that, but I'll kind of give my take on it and some things to consider. And then we're going to go over taxes. So with the taxes, we're going to just do a general overview here, just, general tax filing need to knows, best practices. And from there, we'll end with some practical tips and takeaways. to really, give you a chance to just sum it up all, and then finish up with some resources, and then a big Q&A where we can connect back to a lot of these themes, or something that made you can ask questions unrelated to this presentation, but just know that if it's outside of kind of my purview or my scope, I am gonna kind of put brakes on there, because I want to make sure I can give you an accurate answer at all times. And so if I don't feel like I can do that, I am gonna have to, maybe we'll follow up at a later date. But with that, we're gonna go ahead and get started with budget, aka money plan. I'm a big fan of naming it what you want to name it, something fierce, name it something fun, but it can be anything. You can be tracking your spendings, spend tracker, stuff like that. Real quick though, I wanted to, Olga, if you can actually go ahead and initiate the poll. There's pretty much, we're gonna just populate our first poll today, where I really like to see, before I get started, what's the challenges do you run in when creating a budget or a money plan? Yeah. No, I'm always so curious to see. I feel like every time I run this type of poll, I get a different answer. Right, and it's okay if like these 4 answers are not like end all be all. I'm sure there's other just as meaningful reasons. I feel like I was, and still tend to be in like live in denial. So B has always been my problem point. I used to hate looking at my bank account. I didn't want to know the specifics. If I didn't look, the problem didn't exist. And financial well-being begins with laying a solid foundation. A big piece of that is simply starting off on the right foot in relationship with money. Some people are resistant to that idea of creating a plan, budget, or creating their own awareness in regards to their finances, because they think it's going to fence them in and make them feel like they aren't allowed to spend money. But that couldn't be further from the truth. And so I want to just open with that. It looks like some of you agree with me with B, some of you don't know the way to create a good one. That's definitely a reasonable thing. And hopefully I'll give you some ways to think about it. Maybe not the exact method you want to implement yourself, but enough of a method that you feel like you can take the next steps to pretty much implement your own self-made one.
Can I end the poll and share the results with everyone?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, let's see here. Nice. Yeah, I see not a lot of people are using the not enough time. I guess the last year we've had a lot of free time to come up with a budget if we wanted to. All right. Okay. Cancel it out here. Sorry.
There you go. It's gone, Sam. You can keep going.
So I just want to start here today. And actually, this is a version of the items you will receive in the follow-up interaction email. So don't necessarily, if you can't read this perfectly, sometimes my 9th grade PowerPoint abilities bleed through. But it's okay. But it's good for present day too. Sometimes the best way to understand how to look at financial wellness is to kind of treat it as self-care. You are looking out for yourself. Your financial well-being is literally your financial well-being. And so sometimes the best way to beat any type of stress is to look the stressful thing in the eye and conquer it. It's good for you, future you too. And the sooner you get started, the more time you have to work toward your goals. There's so much I could put on this little cheat sheet of these 6 steps, but the most important thing of all, I think, is that money isn't just money. It's a means to other things: independence, freedom, living the lives we want. So if you're looking for a little nudge to get started, here's a financial self-care checklist. A lot of these steps will actually, be reviewed throughout this presentation and workshop. One step I want to hone in on, though, is that you'll see since number 6 is the practicing mindful moneyness. It's an abstract, less quantitative kind of idea, and it can be the hardest because of that. It requires you to build an intentional relationship with money. Both 2020 and 2021 so far has had many living the money mindfulness life by necessity, right? Just due to the times we're in. While others are experiencing this by force, others are, rather than self-examination, Now is the time, I believe, better than ever. So no matter what, because money mindfulness, it's a money skill. Finding ways to save more through discovering the why and value behind our money, your money, is the key for financial freedom. So, if I made a decision that required me to stretch out of my comfort zone or have less money, right, when I'm thinking about my values and how they connect to everything, it would be worth it because of this said value, right? And so that's the way I like to start thinking about things is if what does this value mean? Like if me and my friends and family were to describe what's truly important to me, I would want this value to be in there. So like once you have an understanding of those specific and unique values, you can then map them to your money goals. You can do this for as long as you think of stuff later or tonight or from stuff or some self-love homework. But for each goal, write down some ways it might connect with your top values, or what kinds of values related things could you do if you were to accomplish it. For example, if you value family and you're struggling to save money for emergencies, maybe you frame each deposit into your savings account as a gift to your family's future for financial security. Or if you value feminism and want to invest more for your retirement, maybe, or save more into local businesses, maybe you want to set a reminder to donate a little bit to the causes you're in each time you bump up your auto save into your 401k, where you invest, or your saving, or your spending allowance into certain businesses. Your future is everyone's future. So you can also use your core values to make more meaningful decisions in your life. Okay. So for this example, stay with me because it gets a little extreme. Say you want a delicious latte from your favorite local coffee shop. Obviously, this is post-pandemic. We're all fully, safe and allowed to go into coffee shops and sit down. Does sharing a coffee, does the experience of sitting quietly with a warm drink map to a core value of self-care? Does sharing coffee time with a friend relate to your value of creating meaningful ties with people? Does caffeination fuel your value of productivity by giving you energy? By buying instead of making coffee, are you prioritizing a value of taking pleasure in little moments or in quality experiences? Are you making a decision to support your local community and small businesses, which, in this post-pandemic future scenario, you value more highly than ever? Maybe you value self-respect and you're deciding to respect your own time. That might sound like a lot of self-examination for a cup of coffee, but this is the type of mindfulness we will become more natural as you practice it. And you might even find from time to time that no is just as satisfying as yes. Like I said, money is a tool that can be used to create a life that aligns with both your values and your goals. So with that, right, we're gonna go real here first. But first things first, I don't want anyone to feel attacked by these descriptions. It's not the purpose, I promise. Instead, we're trying to gain awareness. You can definitely have more than one habit here that I've kind of noted out here, or you can have one that evolved into another one. I know I have been a treat yourself type of spender, especially at low points in this pandemic. DoorDash knows how to get me every time. With those motivation emails to go treat myself to an overpriced dinner for outrageous delivery fees. Meanwhile, my partner is definitely a common victim of the algorithm got me, especially in regards to Instagram ads. I feel there's nothing wrong though with buying your 5th oversized crop sweatshirt or yet another face wash made of the same ingredients as all the other ones sitting in your shower. But if you're going to do it with your eyes wide open. All right. A big key here to developing a sustainable plan driven by your own goals and values is to be honest with yourself about yourself. You need to understand, in order to deal with your impulses, who you are. For some, it's boredom, online shopping. For others, it's based on your own excuses. Have you ever gone into a store planning to spend $50 and end up spending $300, right? It's a marketer's job to turn a want into a need. Have you ever noticed that TV commercials usually do not reveal the product or company until the end of the advertisement? It's because they're selling an idea, a feeling, a desire. And so companies hire social scientists to study our behavior. And so, then how our decision making becomes like a marketing edge. So not putting all the blame on corporations, but remember, like, we're the generation that could make $20 last a whole month in college. So it's not all about discipline, right? Like, we have the discipline, we've done it. But I think there's some things we have to be aware of. So for example, FOMO, right? You know, fear of missing out, very popularized over the last several years. You know, most people are familiar though with also the term keeping up with the Joneses, which refers to making material purchases and based upon your own social circle and what they're doing. The idea is if your neighbors or friends buy a new car, you should too. We call this a comparison trap, right? Because part of the problem with comparing your financial status with others is that it's very difficult to know someone's complete financial picture. Money is still a private topic and everyone has different income, expenses, debt obligations. So the people you're comparing yourself to could completely be up to their eyeballs in debt to fund their lifestyle and you wouldn't even know. So it's kind of like, you know, comparing apples and oranges, but also cast your own possessions in a negative light. At the same time, it's easier to get caught up in others' behavior and not realize its effect on us. To figure out how your finances are being influenced, I usually recommend doing a financial health check. The best way to review your finances is to start a spending journal. This is where this spending journal can be online, like digitally, it can be handwritten, you know, that whatever's going to help you track it. This is where you would see what you're spending your money on and why you're spending it. Do you tend to bust your budget when you shop with your friends? Maybe you eat out often because your friends constantly encourage you to go out with them. So by identifying your triggers and habits, you can figure out how your circle of influence impacts your finances. It might not be as bad as you think. So, you know, trading back, like, I feel like a treat yourself in YOLO by Blind Spender can kind of actually correlate at the same time. It's impossible to work a lot of hours, make good money, and still feel like you don't have enough. It usually happens when you don't save much or track any of what you make, but instead spend everything that comes into your account. The majority of people in America actually live paycheck to paycheck. It's easy to feel trapped due to expenses, especially when you're maintaining a lifestyle not growing wealth. You can fix this by cutting back on unnecessary purchases or ones you won't miss much, like unused subscriptions or gym memberships if you really aren't into that life. But you know, you can get creative ways and find ways to save. From there, you can begin to save money, invest some of your paycheck, and you know, make some progress. That's how we build wealth. Your cash flow is where it all begins. Find that, and that's where you're starting from an area of strength. Get awareness of it, what you're spending, and where you're spending it. But I am curious to see if anyone here would just mind taking a mind, like if you don't feel attacked and you're open to sharing, if you want to just put one in the chat, if you feel like any spender you feel like you've related to. You don't have to, but I'm always curious to see. I'm going to give you a moment if you want it, if you feel comfortable. I actually, yeah, no, I'm seeing a lot of treat yourselves here. I'm saying, I love it, guys. No, these are all real. I've actually had, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only one that I've had to like set limits on my social media apps. So I like, because I feel like at night is when I'm easy to buy, or I'm on the prowl. Yeah, those algorithms are set to like, they're really good, especially Instagram's ads. They're on point. That algorithm does not make mistakes. Sometimes I'm like, were you listening to me? I didn't even Google this. All right. Thanks for sharing, guys. It's good to know who you are, though. It's super helpful in, you know, making, not changing who you are, but working around who you are. And so this is the outlooks for dividing your money. And, you know, the three I list here are definitely not the only three or the best three. They're the ones that I feel the most comfortable talking about. You know, I'm go on that Reddit forum, there's going to be a bunch. some people are resistant to the idea of creating a plan or budget or outlook, right? Because they think it's going to fence them in and make them feel like they aren't allowed to spend money. But that could be further from the truth. Like I said, they aren't restrictive, they are freeing. They are in themselves self-care for helping yourself. So when we're looking at this first one, the 50-30-20 rule, it's not actually a rule that must never be broken. Instead, it's a guideline, or if you're dealing with debt, a general direction. Under this approach, you're trying to divvy up your take-home pay, right, stuff after taxes, your discretionary spending, into 3 buckets. These buckets, of course, can be categorized to fit your own situation. It doesn't have to be the strict 50-30-20 percentage, but for generally, right, 50% goes to needs. This includes bills, groceries, transportation, housing, minimum debt payments, work clothes, and other things you have to pay for. Like they're non-negotiable. 30% could go to wants, right? You don't need rooftop margaritas or Netflix accounts, no really, or trips to anywhere when we're allowed to travel. But fun stuff is important. 20% could go to future you, right? That could be debt payments above the minimum, or saving, investing. Some costs might, one thing I do want to note is some of these costs might overfill your needs bucket. As you see, that takes up a big bulk of it. It's a huge part of this percentage here. And that could potentially be higher if you live in a more expensive market, right? Whether if you move to New York City, if you move to San Francisco, cost of living isn't like living in Ohio potentially. And so there's, that 50% needs might go to 60% needs. And some costs will fall into gray areas as well between 2 categories. For example, let's say a gym membership, which I just, attacked a moment ago. If a gym membership and your health is super important to you, it may not actually be a want. It may be a need if you're not your best self without it, right? And so that's something you have to determine for yourself. But this idea is to do what you can to keep your costs under control, and do what you can to work up to 20% for future you, right? You don't have to start off immediately. That's a lot. I get it for some, but you have a high level framework that'll allow you to grow with it. This outlook is great for, if we're thinking about spending, it can be great for people who don't really like spreadsheets, and are just really working to find a simple way to be healthy have a healthy relationship with their money. The second is going to be the envelope method, right? And this started way back. This is one of the first budgeting methods I used, as it was actually done mostly as a cash-based budgeting system. But let's be real, a lot of us avoid cash at this point. But it can still be used in today's virtual world, right? You have these virtual envelopes. Many online savings accounts have buckets, kind of savings. You can use a virtual spreadsheet in that way to help you out. This system can work great though for populations that commonly overspend. Like if you're an impulse buyer, kind of in denial about how you're spent. You don't think, yeah, I only spent $20 on DoorDash when it really was 70. That kind of overspender. And so, you subtract your expenses from your income and then put the amount of each expense into its own envelope. These envelopes are your categories. These categories are only meant to encompass your fixed expenses. I'm sorry. They're only meant to encompass your variable expenses, my apologies, such as your grocery or your fund budget. Fixed expenses such as your minimum debt payments and rent, your fixed utility bills, like your internet, those are not to be included. You continue to pay those expenses as normal. And these envelope outlooks allow you to use your variable expenses as categories, such as your savings or your debt repayments above the minimum, right? And so it can also be visually helpful. And so, like I said, great for overspenders because literally, if it's in the envelope, that's all you get. Maybe you get more. If you want more, you got to take it from another envelope. And so, are you going to take it from your groceries? Because it can get real by the end of the month. Because cans of soup aren't that tasty, especially when it's hot out. Another form right here, our last one is zero-based budgeting. Basically, a zero-based budget is planning for every single dollar in your budget. So instead of having $X amount left over at the end of the month, you have $0 left on paper anyway. When you're planning out your budget or plan, you account for everything you can think of in it, so that every dollar has a job. You won't really have $0 at the end of the month because you have accounted for different saving funds in the budget, right? So your savings, your debt repayments, they're all in that number. This method can be very effective because it makes you be intentional with every dollar so that what is left doesn't disappear every month. Just from that explanation, I'm sure you can gather this is a more detail-oriented outlook. And to be honest, it may take 1 or 2 months of trial and error to find your groove, because accounting for every dollar isn't the easiest when you don't even realize how many of those little tiny subscriptions add up by the time the month end rolls around. If you have a smart, reasonable plan to hit your short-term and long-term financial goals, whether it's you're someone who's really detail-oriented and you use the zero sum, but as long as you've built, even if it's not the zero sum, as long as you've built a plan that is designed to get you there, and that budget accounts or plan accounts for 20 to 30% to yourself to have fun and enjoy life, then you have already given yourself permission to spend money on fun things. You did the math. You know that going out to eat tonight isn't going to stop you from paying off debt by next year, or by buying a house someday, or saving enough for retirement. So why on earth are you spending extra energy feeling guilty about going out to eat? Like I said, budgets are self-care. You work hard for your money, and if it fits in your budget, you absolutely deserve that dinner, or that latte, or that random thing at Target, or that trip with your friends. So treat yourself. See what I did there? Oops, sorry, went a little too fast. All right, so saving money, how to save money and actually saving money, two different things, right? And so I don't like to just say save money and then not give you any examples. So once you have an idea of where your money is going, and who you are as a spender, right? Your habits, you can make adjustments to your spending to ensure that you are keeping your negotiable expenses, right? Stuff that you can negotiate, isn't like something that's going to keep a roof over your head, below your discretionary income, meaning your spending ability, and leaving enough room to do things like pay down your debt and save for your other goals. I don't want this to become penny pinching, because I think the people under 30 get enough unwarranted advice that tends to be packaged into simplified bite-sized nuggets, like giving up frivolous expenses like random avocado toast or that fancy latte. If you didn't spend for that, then you would suddenly have more savings and be able to buy a house. If you can't tell, I'm not a big fan of that kind of hot take. They're not relevant, and honestly, they're kind of crap. Are you kidding me? When we're on the other side of this pandemic, I'm dancing to the coffee shop every morning on my way to the office to treat myself to some delicious, warm, milky lattes. I'll do that. I'll do my frothy latte dance, knowing that I've done the math and they're wrong. Okay, but I digress. The point I want to make is, rather than telling yourself what you can and cannot spend money on, think about telling yourself why you're making certain trade-offs. And you'll be making financial trade-offs of your life in tough times when you need to make choices to cut backs, and better times when you need to choose between several goals and priorities. When you know exactly what and why you're doing something, it can easily relate it back to something real, how it really means to you. Then you're spending intentionally, and even difficult decisions can feel more right. So what does that all mean, right? For example, believe it or not, 2019 was the first year I went without cable. I was paying about $140 a month on cable and internet, but all I did was watch Netflix. I think the biggest barrier for me was that my provider had a termination fee of like $150, and I was so emotional. I was like, oh no, I can't do that, right? Because that was like an emotional hurdle for me to get over. I can't just drop $150 on top of that. But I finally bit the bullet, and now I pay around $70 a month for internet, just for internet. So I decreased my expenses by 50%. And made up the termination fee and came out ahead in under 3 months. And going forward, my expenses have been 50% less in this area. That was 50% more that I was able to make available in my extra monthly cash flow and was able to put toward other uses. I can't honestly remember what uses they went through, but you get the point. I actually did the same thing recently for my phone bill, but not on a bigger scale. I took note of my current situation. I've been working from home the last year. Why did I need unlimited data? I pay $70 for wireless internet. So, I'm saving over $200 a year by just cutting back on my phone bill, right? I don't, just by having a data limit, which I never meet right now. Maybe down the line when I'm allowed to leave my apartment, I will allow, have to go back up to a limited, but I'm enjoying the extra savings right now. I also, I tend to pay my car insurance semi-annually. You can save a few dollars that way, by the way, pro tip. If you ever feel like you get a lump sum savings, think about putting it towards your car insurance. It's great not to worry about it for 6 months. Because I'm actively driving less by thousands of miles a year right now, I decided to reach out to Geico on my last renewal. And by giving them the honest update that I went from driving about 9,000 miles a year to barely 3,000, I rounded up because accidental negligence insurance fraud scares me. So I'm probably doing less than 3,000 miles, but I just wanted to be safe. Not that they're coming to check. But anyway, I saved over $300 just by doing that. That was $300 on a huge bill. That was amazing. So by themselves, these may not seem like much, not at all. But if you, aggregate, combine these different saving opportunities over a year, it can be incredibly impactful, especially when it comes to like little tiny subscriptions. As I briefly noted earlier, I have a borderline problematic relationship with DoorDash. Sometimes I feel like they hit me up more than my friends. The thing is, I love a good deal, and sometimes DoorDash will just drop a nice promo right into my inbox at the perfect time. However, it becomes problematic if I'm getting these emails at times when I'm not intentionally going to make a great decision, right? Kind of thinking back to my own goals. So I actually had to subscribe to them through an email I don't check regularly, because can't miss out on those discounts, of course, but also don't want to get active alerts if I'm not in a mood to actually buy DoorDash. So while I'm not trying to get you to unsubscribe from any Bed Bath & Beyond discounts that come through your inbox, because those are great and they're frequent, but does those weekly 20% off emails need to come through your primary source of email communications? If so, why not use the 48 to 72 hour rule that I have here listed? I like to do this in particular as an intentional exercise for both my diet and my money, actually. If this sugar cookie was not just randomly put in front of me right now at this exact second, would I actually be craving it? Or is it just convenient right now and I wasn't even thinking about it beforehand? The 72 hour rule gives me, or even going back to the 40, it can be 48 hours, it gives me time to excuse myself from that offhand random moment and actually mindfully make my choice. If after 48 hours, 72, if I still want that dang sugar cookie, I'm gonna eat it. Oh, obviously not that one because it's probably stale, but you get where I'm coming from. If anyone has experienced similar items in regards to saving money, or have experienced an item that I didn't list here because there's so many, please take a moment, put something in the chat. I'm sure others here are curious to hear about other opportunities to save. Does anyone here actually watch cable still? Like live TV? So I feel like I used commercials a couple slides ago and I'm like, no one watches commercials anymore, except if you have Hulu and don't pay for the bougie kind. Nice. I admire your discipline to cancel Postmate. That takes a lot of discipline. Nice. And if you'll notice, I actually put, one of these like topics here is, how much do you value it? That kind of comes back to that, like, I wanted the sugar cookie after 72 hours. Does it align with my goal? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, in the latte and stuff, you want it, just be aware of it, understand what you're doing, why you're doing it. And yeah, I'm sure if you're saving elsewhere, it's going to work out. It's not going to, at the end, you should not feel guilty about your choice. Own it and move on. So cash flow management, stay with me on this one. When talking about personal finance or financial literacy, we don't hear much about cash flow management at all. I actually get a little frustrated with this issue in particular, because I'll sit here wondering, why do people quit budgeting or planning or tracking their expenses only after a few months in? And then, I've realized that not many have fully discussed how to properly set up your bank accounts so it could flow with your own specific and unique plan. Just for the record, this isn't just an example of a framework that could be implemented, not the end all be all. Ultimately, I encourage you to find a system that is best for your plan. In this particular example, you'll see there's four accounts total. 2 are checking-based accounts, and the other 2 are savings-based accounts, right? So because they function a little differently. The reason why I classified them each differently is because when it comes to bill accounts, right, stuff you fix your fixed expenses or your lifestyle, whether it's your, going out for margaritas, the, Netflix, or even, stuff you don't think about, like when you run out of toothpaste and it doesn't just magically appear. Those go through the lifestyle, just like the stuff that isn't the big bills that are coming and are kind of like your non-negotiables. The reason is because money is actively coming in, it's flowing in, flowing out. Generally, a savings account is best when you have limited cash flow leaving, or the withdrawals are more spread out over time. That is because many savings accounts will have limits to the amount of time money can leave in a statement cycle. I think it's about 6 max for most, at least on mine and a couple others I've experienced. So between that and that savings accounts tend to give interest, they're interest bearing. I think they're more ideal for emergency fund accounts or savings goals that can be very short or even a year or so away. While I said you don't have to use this exact framework, one thing I would absolutely recommend is keeping your emergency fund account in an FDIC savings account that is definitely separate from your spending or bills account. It needs to take at least a full business day to get to the account. It needs to help, right? It shouldn't be instantaneous. Because I know for me, pre-pandemic, a concert could have been classified as an emergency. So for my behavioral state, I should not be able to instantly access my emergency fund. It should take a little bit of effort. But in cases where lightning actually strikes and you need to use it, or because I need to replace a part of my car, I don't understand because a mechanic took advantage of the fact that I don't understand and my ignorance, and now it's a huge bill, or I need liquid, or I need to pay off my credit card or put that bill in, right? I would have the liquid funds available, so I can either cover it with my credit card, but I'll have the money immediately able to pay it off before it's due, or I can, be able to have the cash to this, unethical mechanic in a day, right? Because I'll have it to come through. So, just that's why I encourage having it separate in that sense. But, some people might even have 5 accounts. They might separate savings, short-term savings and long-term savings, because they want to make sure, it can be visually helpful. There's, I wouldn't say there's not so many accounts you can create, but enough that's manageable. I know there's a lot of online savings accounts that are easy to add one on top of another. I know many do buckets these days, because you can have like one account, but you can separate them into visual buckets, which is super fun. I like those. But you can always have more than one account. But that I think is a good place. So like once you figure out your outlook and how you want to implement it, I think a big part that also helps spending and saving is just separating the accounts and have an understanding. Going back to our awareness. If your lifestyle and bills account is combined, are you going to fail? Absolutely not. But you are adding an extra barrier, right? Like I don't know if there have been points in your life where I was sitting out to dinner with my partner back in my paycheck to paycheck days, and I had to do like quick mental math and to see like, would this dinner interfere with my ability to pay rent, which is due in 2 days, right? And so when you separate those, you have the ability to kind of have that awareness so that you can confidently buy that dinner and don't have to do quick restaurant math. So with cash management, feel free to drop a couple, we are going to move on briefly to debt. But I want to make sure if you have any questions related to what we talked about, feel free to just drop it in the chat. And if it's going to be elaborate explanation, I can save it probably for the Q&A, but if you just need me to elaborate quickly on something, go ahead. I want to make sure while it's fresh in your mind.
Sam, I made it so everyone can unmute too. So if anyone does
awesome.
want to just ask a question, feel free to go for it.
I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Raquel. I was an English major and I graduated fall 2019. I'm currently living in LA where everyone loves spending and getting in debt. But I think my question is, what is a genuine way of self-care that like doesn't cost money, that actually like makes you feel good?
First of all, Raquel, thanks for your question. And honestly, that's a brilliant question. Like, and I'm not gonna have all of them today, but for me, self-care is, and I've visited LA. I understand exactly where you're coming from about the spending, especially if you don't want to spend money on it and your friends do. And I know LA, I was in San Diego for a couple of years, so I was there frequently, and I have a lot of friends in LA. And one thing's first, I want to say is if your circle of influence isn't setting you up for success, I encourage you to re-examine your circle of influence. Like if you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people, especially in a place like LA, it's easier to find free self-care items. No,
Yeah.
and this is everywhere. This applies not just to LA. This is, what do they say? You're the 5 people that you're closest to, right? And so that's going to be super helpful. And if any friends judge you for trying to do self-care items, that's something we got to put a stop to. But yeah, when you're thinking about it, one thing is finding local areas to do. I don't know what self-care means to you, but self-care means to me means fulfillment. So when I'm doing something that's good, I feel good, for whether it's for myself or others, I feel good about it. So whether that means volunteering in your community, right, with your free time, instead of going to the mall to shop. I don't know if anyone actually goes to malls anymore, or spending time online shopping. Check out your local community. It's everywhere online. Is there free workshops? Is there free stuff you can attend to? Especially once we're in post-pandemic, there's going to be so many people are going to want people to come through to see their experiences and learn from them. Definitely optimize on that. Also, free trials are amazing. Whether it's a subscription or it's in real life, if you want to just, one thing I will say, free trials, those vendors and providers, they thrive on you forgetting that you're in a free trial. So if you do set up a free trial, put it in your calendar, your Google Calendar, so you know to cancel. But I've done that for stuff where I'm not sure I want to buy. And, I think it will be self-care, but I feel like I need to try it out first. And so that, that's another way to kind of do it, but also not get trapped if it ends up not being the best route for self-care. No, that's a great question, though. I hope I gave you a little bit of clarity, or some places to find more clarity. Thanks. Yeah, no, does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free. Hey, yeah, I've got a question in the chat here. Any recommendation on good apps for tracking your expenses? Good question. I do have a bunch. They're listed in the resources that you'll be received, but I'll go over them real quickly. One of them is, Mint is here. Mint is free. Free is me. Like that, it takes a minute to get used to. It's not, if you're not more the tech friendly, but it's free and it's great. And it actually is, what I like the best about Mint is it can encompass so much from all your accounts, right? It paints kind of like your net worth picture, which I think when you're trying to go between 5 different platforms to figure it out, it will actually, Mint actually, you can connect your bank account. And so it'll pull in transactions. Does it do it 100% accurately always? It's a computer, it makes errors, but you can teach the computer, which is what I like. Another one is You Need a Budget, YNAB. It works best for the zero sum budgeting because it actually has you assigned every dollar. I will admit, while I like it, I also hate it because there's a little bit of a learning curve. But I suggest it as a resource because they have a generous free trial. I think it's 34 days. So if you did want to invest in it, you've had exposure enough to see if you really like it. But I've learned, have a year free trial for people in school. So whether you're a college, undergrad or graduate, if you're able, I can't I'm not 100% certain how they go about, approving your student memberships, but I have looked at the website and it is still active as a way to get one free year. As well as, honestly, don't knock Google Sheets and their budgeting templates. They're free too, which I said, right, free is me. And it's actually pretty useful. I actually learned a little bit from spending. But if you're a spreadsheet person, I'll be honest, my first budget that I ever did was on an unnamed Excel sheet, literally just putting random numbers in and then doing, because I didn't have any Excel ability at the time, just sum all, because that's the only thing I knew how to do. And so that was, and that's a good place to start because I had awareness. And from there, I was like, oh, that wasn't so hard. And that kind of led me down my path. And so that's, that was like, and then don't worry, I name my Excel sheets now, but I think it's a way to kind of set what works for you. But affordable cheap insurance. So good question. So for auto, how to reduce for auto insurance, one of them was calling, just talk to them. I think a lot of times, especially our generations, we hate talking to humans, and I know it sucks. I hate talking to humans too. But given my profession, outside of my profession, I don't. The last thing I want to do is talk more. But that's actually how you get a lot of deals and discounts, right? Is when you bring the human element into it. So I would encourage you to call your provider if you don't have one. Make sure check with what they have for you. Like how many miles are you driving on their record? What kind of coverage do you have? I'm not saying change your coverage, but sometimes I'm like, if you have AAA, why are you paying an extra several dollars just for roadside assistance, right? So that kind of thing to think about. Also, if you have certain credit cards, they provide roadside assistance. So why, if you're taking care of there, why are you paying for there? So just making sure that whatever you're paying for in your insurance isn't overlapping in other parts of your life. Can be a good way to save a couple dollars if we're penny pinching there. No, I wouldn't phrase it like necessarily like as maybe discounts you can give me, but I would like to say like, hey, what do you guys have for me? Like, can you work with me? I've been a long-term type of customer. I was actually with Progressive for a while, and I got into like one fender bender that wasn't even my fault. Okay, I had a little bit of road rage in San Diego, but it still wasn't my fault. And they raised like $500 out of nowhere, and it wasn't even a claim. But anyway, from there I went to Geico with the same thing, right? I was like, hey, I have a perfect driving record before this. What can you do for me? I talked to a human, and they actually got me lower than I was paying originally for Progressive. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Progressive or promote Geico, but that was just me leveraging my own experiences to, not pit two insurance companies against each other, but to know that there's a marketplace out there. And so I should never settle based on loyalty. I've never, I switched around. Like, I can't say that Geico gave me cheaper because I was with Progressive, but it doesn't hurt to throw other names in your mouth in there. But, because I've heard these providers out there say, we'll pay the difference. I've never actually utilized that. So unfortunately, I can't speak to it. But I always encourage you to occasionally check in with your insurance providers, because if you've been with someone for years and you're still paying the same rate, that's something to think about. Like, are you still paying the valid market rate? I just want to make sure. Oh yeah, I like this. I think I forgot to mention this too. I am actually based out of California. I'm in Oakland now, but no, it's good to know about them. I have actually not experienced them. And one thing to know is for car insurance in particular, if you're in a city, if you have a sports car, that's going to be higher. So making sure that you know that when you're making life choices, not that you should move to a city, but if you're trying to buy a Ford Mustang or a Tesla, one's going to get a better insurance rate, not that. And so not that anyone here would want to comes to a financial literacy concept and then buys a Tesla, but just the kind of comparison, they're going to be rated a little differently. All right. I think I got everyone's questions. Now this is good stuff. So if you think of anything else, don't worry, there'll definitely be a Q&A. And then, so we're gonna actually test one thing here. So I had this phrase here, but it doesn't look like it's actually, oops. one moment. It should be populating. Of course, this never goes on. All right, I'm actually going to stop sharing for one moment here because I think this could be a fun exercise. So I definitely want to do it. All right. Sorry, I believe I didn't have the computer app up. I was like, it asked me for like my password and I like forgot. Like I was like, oh no, don't do that to me now. You always remember your passwords. All right, I'm just pulling up here. I want to make sure you guys, so I wanted to do this word cloud where you just text or put in somebody. If worst comes to worst, we'll just do it in the chat. All right, come back to share my screen now. Okay. Oops. So it doesn't look like it wants to be friendly today. So we're gonna go ahead and if you actually wouldn't mind, oh, there we go. It actually works. I'm sorry. So you can go ahead and you can either go online to pollev.com / Samantha Silb 058 or text that to that and then just like in one word or expression, what do you associate with the word debt? Because it's not all negative. It can be mostly negative to you. No harm in that. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts before we really kind of dive into this.
Sam, can you give us that URL? We can't see it on your screen.
Oh,
just put it in the chat so we could link.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Can you guys, are you having issue? Have you like seen just the top of the screen? It is not popping for you.
We just see your blank screen for the poll everywhere.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so I put in the URL and then I'm going to go ahead if you want to text this to this phone number. Whenever I've done this for myself, like if I'm participating in this, I generally usually just do the online version. But I want to make sure you guys have both options. Nice. Flexing. Interesting. Like that one. Yikes. Yeah, same. Burden. It seems like that, usually if there's more than one of the same answer, it actually populates through, it makes the word bigger. So apparently burden isn't the only one that everyone's feeling.
Hi, Sam. Also, just so you know, I don't think we can see the results on your screen.
Oh, no. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so we're gonna just scrap poll everything and I'm gonna talk to them later. But I am curious though. So in the chat, if you could list one word or expression that you generally associate with the word debt. So far, if some of you've done it, I have some results here already, but I want to make sure everyone else kind of sees it if you don't mind. If you don't feel comfortable, like this was supposed to be done anonymous, I feel free not to, but I've heard some good things. I heard burden, I heard yikes, slavery. I haven't, that I don't usually think, but it's absolutely sometimes I feel like true. College, yep. I heard flexing, that was a good one. Society, yep. Oh. Feel free to keep these coming, but I'm kind of going to get to why I'm asking these questions, because these are all valid things, right? And for the most part, I think it's safe to say these were pretty negative. And I think that has a lot to do with good debt and bad debt. Just before I get started here, I don't want to waste any of your time anymore. Can you guys see the screen? Just give me a shake. Thumbs up, awesome. Got some trust issues now, so want to make sure those are taken care of. But yeah, good debt versus bad debt. There's a difference, believe it or not. Debt, it's not all, there is a lot of, but many of us will take on debt at some point in our lives, even if you've managed to lay debt free. It can enable us to go to school or buy a home when we wouldn't be able to otherwise. So some debt can be good, just as much of it can be bad. And too much debt, when you can't see your way to repay it, is always bad, right? So one form of potentially good debt can be student loan debt. Hear me out. Don't freak out. Okay, I realize it's a touchy subject, but outside of that, a great education can lead to be a more interesting job with a salary increase phrase we were fed most of our life. It is an investment into your future self. Whether you end up using your degree or not, you still learn, whether, even if you can't advertise yourself to employers, you learned more about yourself. So it is an investment. And generally student loan rates can be as low as 3.5%, or even range up, closer to 7. So, we'll cover that part in a little bit, but generally interest on student loans can actually be a tax deductible item up to $2,500. So depending, the interest that you paid on it. So depending on your income level, of course, which will also reduce your annual cost of the actual loan. So, not saying you get it all back, but, there is a little bit of a way to make it less expensive for you. And it's bettering your future self in some form or way. Another form of good debt can be a mortgage to buy a house. It's good because, well, you have a home, and that's always great to have. But that can also be a form of an investment over time, not in both yourself, but also the value of the home if it goes up. As well, interest rates on mortgages can be low, like right now, since we're, I don't know if you've noticed, we're in a very low historical, low interest rate environment. But, so generally it's been 5% low, but probably even lower right now temporarily. I'm not saying go buy a house, but I'm just saying the impact of a low interest rate environment could lead to that. So we're currently, I would say, they're also similar to student loans. The interest payments can be tax deductible, so which again can make this kind of debt less expensive overall. Maybe not as much, but also auto loans can be a good reasonable debt if you get a reasonable rate. I will say, I would say right now, based on the market, if you have an average credit score in the 600s, high 500s, which it is dependent on, you could still walk away with a decent cheap rate between 4 and 7%. And in the end, if any debt helps your future self or current self to better your future self, for example, if this auto loan helps you afford a car that helps you generate income, in the end, it's helping your future self. It's good. High interest credit cards balances so much, not so much bad. They're not the type of good debt. They're bad debt. I feel like a lot of people find themselves consistently borrowing from their future self. I've been there. What does that look like? Actually, what does it say to borrow from your future self? There were parts in my life when I have internally said things like, oh no worries, my statement starts over again on the 21st. So I'll move that expense to then for right now. That sounds familiar at all. It happens. Don't get me wrong, like we have to live like this sometimes. Life calls for it, especially when sudden circumstances change, like what happened over the last year. It's not a sustainable way to make a future for yourself. It limits you from potentially getting ahead because it could lead to the beautiful power of, compounding interest over time to working against you in this point. So, you also don't get the tax breaks that you get on interest paid like you do for mortgage and student loans. That interest you pay, goes to the vendors and they like it. The lenders that they thrive on you paying interest. That's how they maintain a business. Credit cards are what we refer to as revolving debt. Unlike a mortgage or student loan or even auto loan, which are more classified as installment debt, you just open the window of opportunity to acquire more debt every month. So for a YOLO or treat yourself spender, that could become very problematic over time, especially and so some questions I like to pose to people who are newer to credit cards. Do you know the actual balance of your debt? Or do you just pay the minimum amount due? Sometimes it's 25, 35, 40. The balance is what you actually owe, regardless of what you're required to pay. Look at all debt in this way. If you only look at what's required, you'll be making the lender, the provider, very happy. Not that they're purposely unethical or, but minimums due calculations generally do not have the consumer's best interest at heart. So know that when you only go to pay the minimum each time. Are you helping yourself or helping them? Sometimes, and it's okay. I'm not going to shame anyone for ever having to pay the minimum. You got to do what you got to do to get by. I get it. But think about that when you're, buying a subscription box for your dog instead of paying more on your insurance, right? Or paying a lot because you had to put your insurance on your debt or your credit card. Other bad loans can be payday loans and personal loans that are abused for discretionary purposes. Both can lead to very expensive habits. They both traditionally have higher, outrageous, unbelievable interest rates because they're not meant to be carried over and miss their payments. Like you are fundamentally setting yourself up for failure if you continue to do payday loans and not make the payments. I've seen stuff as high as like 300%. I'm not lying. They are meant to be short-term band-aids and paid off when you get your next paycheck immediately. I don't want to come off as anti-credit card though. I have one. They're definitely useful in a pinch or an emergency, or even for everyday spending if you're a user that has the income ability to pay it off every month. As I listed here, as you can see here on the keys to consumer debt, it should not be used as a constant, consistent borrowing plan. Only spend money you actually have or will have. Here's the rule. If you have to put it on a credit card in order to buy the thing, then don't buy the thing. If you have to dip into your emergency fund and this is not in fact an emergency, then also don't buy this thing. Otherwise, you're probably in fair territory. Buy it. Mindfulness and bringing yourself back to connecting your values to your goals is a crucial thing here. With that, I always like to go over some common excuses based on outdated myths that I typically come across in my coaching and my conversations. So one of the myths I hear is, you need a credit card. That's fake news. Cash is still king, and debit cards are accepted everywhere credit cards are. I will put an extra note that hotels and rental cars will need to authorize a hold on your debit card if you don't have a credit one, and that will take that money out of the equation for a little bit. That's when the 2 times when it's kind of like a disadvantage, but not enough to should not be enough to convince you to get a credit card. Sorry, I see some good questions coming in, so I want to make sure. Yeah, we're gonna get to there. So credit cards are necessarily to build your credit score. False. Timely required payments on car loans, student loans, mortgages, they do the job too. FYI, student loan payments actually weigh heavier on your credit score than credit cards. And it has to do with the fact that it's not revolving debt. Carrying a credit card balance improves my credit score. I don't even know where this myth comes from, but yeah, definitely no. Your score will go down if you're generally using more than 30% of your available credit. That's called high utilization. You're never penalized for paying off your credit card in full each month. Like I said, this goes back to the revolving versus installment type of debt. In fact, that's why you may see your credit score dip temporarily when you pay off a student loan. It's because it weighs heavier when you close out the debt. So your score sees it as closing out a line of credit and gets kind of nervous for some reason. However, if you continue to make, on-time payments elsewhere, right, for credit card, other student loans, this will quickly rebound. So don't let it ever deter you from, limiting paying off a student loan, because it's still 100% worth it. Okay, I saw some questions come in. So I want to make sure. Can if you wouldn't mind asking, like, maybe why what parts of credit card statements maybe like, is it the actual amount you owe, or is it the, you know, how to read your expenses or available balance? Oh, I'm sorry, you posted under that. Yeah, so your current, so good question, and it's not as straightforward. So your statement, you have a statement period, right? Where, for example, going back to my example of the 21st of the month is when a statement would start over. So on the 21st, right? So if I made a purchase on the 20th, no, actually the 19th, right? That's going to be counted during the statement period that ends on the 20th. So on the 21st, I am going to get hey, Sam, you spent this month last statement, you owe this balance, it's due in about, usually it's about 21 to 30 days from now, you owe from the previous statement. Your current balance takes into whatever you owe on your previous statement balance, plus what you've accumulated since the 19th, right? The reason why I'm saying, 20th is usually, for me, like my statement would potentially start over on the 21st, it ends on the 20th, but sometimes it's kind of iffy about, if you purchase it in the morning, it could still be on the previous statement. So I always like to give it like a business day there to kind of like get me some credit there. So for example, I hope that made a little sense. Current balance is all encompassing of everything you owe. Statement balance is what's going to be what you need to pay off before your due date. So this is a great question. What's considered a good credit score for buying a house or getting a loan? We're actually gonna have a fun activity with this in a bit, so stay tuned. But it's also not always dependent on your credit score, just as a heads up. All right. Can you guys still hear me coming through here? Yeah, awesome. Okay, let me know if that changes. Especially Haley, for some reason I can see you, so I just wave if it starts going crazy. All right, so I just talked about debt and good debt. Now we got to get into let's get into the nitty gritty, right? The debt repayment strategies. So just the average American, right? I think we're paying more than $38,000 in personal debt these days. That includes credit cards, personal loans, student loans, etc. It's a lot. I'm thankful that many of you took time to reply upon registration to give insight into your own personal concerns and questions. It was not particularly surprising, though, that many of you replied interested to learn about debt repayment strategies. Paying off debt is a fantastic goal to have, but it's easier wished than actually done. So how do you make a plan that works? Snowball. So made popular by Dave Ramsey. He's a smart dude. I got my issues with him, but the debt snowball is solid. It prioritizes paying off your smallest debt first and then rolling that payment, after that's paid off, into the next smallest debt, right? And chipping away that way. This method works best for those who love instant gratification and need quick wins to stay motivated. You will pay off small debts quickly, which confirms that what you're doing is working. So, how does this work? What would I recommend doing? You organize all your debts remaining balances from lowest to highest. Pay the minimum payments, or maybe a little bit more above the minimum payments, to all balances except the lowest remaining balances. So any extra money that you have set aside in your envelopes or whatever, all that debt would go to that debt. You do this until that debt is paid off. Then you throw all your extra money to the next lowest balance, and so on until you are debt free. Then there is the debt avalanche. So this one was made popular by Sue Zorman. The avalanche method, it prioritizes tackling your highest interest rate debts first. So maybe your, high loan, credit cards, maybe your private student loans. This method works good. This way, I would say well for people who are driven to get out of debt and don't need a quick win, right? They see the long haul. They don't need that psychological, they don't need that behavioral advantage and stuff like that. So, it's organized the same way, but this time by the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate. And you pay the minimum payment, or potentially a couple dollars more, stick it to the man, to low interest rate debts, and then the rest, all that extra money, to the highest interest rate, because they cost you extra money. You're going to pay more over time. So if you eliminate the highest debt first, you even have extra money to pay off each debt each month and will lose less money overall. Then there is the debt flood. You make the minimum payments on everything every month, no matter what. As you notice, that's a thing for all of them. You always pay the minimums. Anything additional is evenly allocated among all debts. So for example, if you suddenly get a lump sum, repayment, tax refund about $1,000 and had 5 different loans or debts, you would apply $200 extra towards all of them on top of the minimum. This is generally not a strategy I would recommend, but is commonly used strategy because I think it makes the most sense up front. It seems the most logical up front, but when you do the math, it's kind of like you're digging a hill and it's just like, it's all you're seeing is your 1 foot there. It's like, it doesn't get any deeper. It takes the longest, to be honest. And then there's the debt to sum. This is actually not a real strategy, but I guess it could happen. I like even numbers, so I went at 4. But I guess it could happen, if you win the lottery, get an inheritance, when Price is Right, then you would wipe out all your debt. But we're going to use the other ones to make, in the meantime, before that happens, we'll use the other methods. So, but which one's better? And this is where the sticky part of personal finance and literacy comes in. It's a gray area. Ultimately, that's going to be a you thing. You could snowball your payments to keep motivation high, or you could move them down the mountain faster like an avalanche, obliterating those interest payments along the way. I have done both in the past, so I have experience with both, but surprisingly, I actually prefer the debt snowball, as I enjoyed seeing my student loans drop from 5 to 4 to 3. It was kind of a fun game in a twisted kind of way. But many finance professionals out there and many of those Reddit experts have a strong aversion to having to pay more interest than absolutely necessary, which is a valid point. I'm not saying they're wrong. And so that's why you're going to see the debt avalanche method continue to be the superior recommendation. And to be transparent, when I used the snowball method, I was paying off federal loans that were 3 to 4%, not above 6 to 7%. So maybe my process may have been different otherwise. Neither is right or wrong. Important to pick a strategy that works for you. And it might, be open to changing your strategy. But I think it's a good way to think about, start, like how, build a plan. What did I say? Build a plan, execute the plan goes off the rails, find a new plan. Just keep evolving with it. All right. So for student loans, so I could honestly give a whole kind of like webinar here on student loans, but I tried to sum it up in 4 important points. I commonly work with many who are fresh out of college, and they may come to meet with me because they want to know how to optimize their new employer retirement plan, or what personal finance aspects should they focus on. And then when I turn around though and ask them about their student loans, and I'm curious about whether they're federal or private, 9 out of 10 times I get the blankest stare. So if you haven't, you need to put on your to-do list as soon as possible to go look at all your student loans, looking at all, I know looking at them all in one place and getting real is less than fun, but it's an important first step, because I have it here. Know the difference between your federal and private loans. Super important. Federal loans, right? They are given out by the US government. They make up close to about 90% of student debt in the US right now. If you have federal loans, they'll be managed by one of few specific loan servicing companies. However, private loans, meanwhile, are given out by independent, definitely for profit type of banks, like Sally Mae. You may have heard of her. Not the friendliest Sally I've ever met, but she's one of those examples. The reason this distinction matters is that federal and private loans have different repayment terms. Federal loans tend to give you a little bit more flexibility. They have income-driven repayment plans that tie your monthly minimum payment to your salary. And they have the option for potential loan forgiveness, which we'll review in a moment, and are usually only available for federal loans, those repayment options. So since private loans give you virtually no wiggle room, when it comes to repayment, I often recommend focusing on those loans first if you're implementing any of those type of snowball avalanche methods. They probably will also have the higher rate. Interest rates matter on student loans. they typically fall into one or two categories, fixed or variable. After, I believe it was 2006, all federal loans have fixed interest rates. So I'm gonna take a safe guess that everyone here has a fixed federal variable rate if they have a federal loan. I don't think I'm talking to someone here who graduated in 2006. But private loans, on the other hand, can have either a fixed interest rate, which doesn't change in the middle of the loan or long term, but a variable interest rate, which could change depending on economic conditions. So that's part of the reason why, not now, because we're in a low interest rate, but in the past, why private loan interest rates could be up close to 13%, depending on current federal interest rates. It's a big part of that. So your credit and the lender tend to be much higher than the rate that you'll get for federal loans. So as I said, that's why I generally prioritize them. So understanding the two recent additions. So a standard repayment plan outside of what these are for the federal loans lasts 10 years. And you owe the same minimum payment over those 10 years in order to pay off your loans and the interest to get there, right, over those 10 years. So, but in income-driven repayment plans, right, you use your discretionary income, how much your pre-tax income exceeds the federal poverty line. They then calculate a monthly payment for you. This can be really helpful if you have a lot of student debt and it seems overwhelming and you have no idea what you're supposed to pay each month. The repayment period for an income-driven repayment plan is typically 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan, whether it's undergrad, graduate. Generally, it's about that. And any outstanding balance after that time, whether it's 20 or 25 years, is automatically forgiven. There are 4 types of income-driven retirement plans. I have 2 here. So we have the repayee plan, REPAYE plan, the payee plan, PAYE plan, the IBR plan, and the ICR plan. I listed the 2 there because they're the most 2 recent additions, right? And so they tend to be a little bit prioritized right now, but I'm not saying one or other is the better. So the difference though, so the repayee plan, your monthly payments will typically be 10% of your discretionary income. Meanwhile, the payee, right, it's similar to the repay, but except, so if we go back to what I said about the standard 10-year federal loan repayment, it won't ever exceed that, which the other one is at risk of. I'm not saying you guarantee will, but you could potentially pay more over time than you would have if you would have just went with the traditional standard 10-year repayment option. Well, I'm gonna get into a little bit more because I want to actually talk a couple about these, but before finishing up here and taking a look in the chat box for any questions, especially since private loans don't offer any of these income-driven repayment plans. So what I just kind of blurred out there, like your private loans automatically don't qualify for those. So I always recommend looking at other ways to kind of chip away to lower those interest rates or save money. So one thing I always say is, hey, if you don't have it yet, if you have a private loan and you're still making your monthly payments, and right, you're not at risk to miss any, the easiest way, to sign up is do auto pay. It can shave off close to like 0.25% of your interest rate, depending on your lender. Okay, it's not the biggest discount, but every penny counts. Like if you're already doing what you're going to set up to do, just do it. I know, like I've in the past, I know I had auto pay on my private loans. I just suddenly thought I wasn't going to be able to make my minimum payments that I successfully made every year. I always found the money to work. So that's where I recommend. So if you know yourself and you've been making these payments, set up for auto pay, see if there's a discount there. Loan refinancing. I didn't list that here, but I want to talk about it briefly because working with a private lender who replaces your existing loans with a single loan that has a lower interest rate, you may be able to refinance your federal loans.
Hey, Samantha, we lost you for a second.
Hey, yeah, I realized one of my headset's phones died. I thought I caught it before it went out. What was the last thing you heard?
It was only like 20 seconons ago. What was the last thing? It's like a test. Suddenly we just had a pop.
Yeah, I know.
It was like right as you transitioned.
Okay, perfect. No, I was talking about loan refinancing, which is different than loan consolidation. Loan refinancing actually depends on your credit score. And so, and you would have, one thing I want to say is if you were to, not saying you should refinance your federal loan because you could potentially be giving up those flexible repayment options. But it might make sense for your private, right? So that's something to look at, but really make sure you pay attention. Most student loan refinancing companies offer both fixed and variable rate loans. And so they can be lower, and they can be higher. And so the better your credit score is, you're going to get a better deal. That's there. And so, but don't let that be a factor. I would, I'm not saying I don't have a relationship with any of these companies, but companies that I do trust, just based on my experience with them, working with people, is Earnest, SoFi, or Common Bond are good places just to get a little bit more information on that. I'll actually post so people know what I mean by that. I'm not saying they're the best ever, but I think at the end of the day, they're at least regulated to do what's in your best interest, and they actually have, they're keeping up with the times to make it more relevant. I think, and easier to get out of. And then there's loan consolidation. This is different from loan refinancing. Refinancing allows you to use your current credit, how your credit looks now, to lower your interest rate on your loans, right? However, consolidation, on the other hand, simply averages all your existing loans' current interest rates together. So it has nothing to do with your credit score. So, but but I will recommend, if your credit score has improved by at least 50 points or so since you took out your private loans, your lender may give you a lower rate if you consolidate. So in that case, it doesn't always hurt checking out. This actually goes back to what we talked about with insurance companies. Talk to your providers, talk to a human, help yourself out. Don't just sit there and endure, see what can do for yourself. Tell them your situations have changed. This is what you're doing. Be honest, don't commit fraud. And but generally, just check in with them. Help yourself, help them. But one thing I want to point out, it can be, while consolidating can be worth checking out, and I encourage you to call your providers, a trustee provider. Consolidating often means you're paying off your debt longer. So while your monthly payment requirements, minimums might be cheaper, you may end up paying more interest when it's all said and done. So definitely be aware of that. One thing is, we touched on it briefly, and there's two general big forgiveness options that I think might make sense to talk the most about to this audience. So there's public service loan forgiveness, PSLF, and then there's teachers loan forgiveness. I'll go quickly into teachers loans because this one's very specific, and it's open and shut. There's no room for interpretation. I feel like 5 years complete in consecutive academic years, right, in a low income school or educational service. You'll notice that the amount $17,500 for forgiveness at the end of that is what you'll get. Is not total forgiveness, but for some people that actually might be total forgiveness by coincidence. And then one thing super important, must be a highly qualified teacher. So bachelor's degree, which makes sense if you have loans, I guess. I'm not going to say if that makes sense because there's probably some person that meets the odds here, but received a full state certification as a teacher as well. So, and then there might also be other requirements based on where you're teaching in the state you're in as well. But and same thing in regards to public service loan forgiveness, this only makes sense if this is a career choice for you. Do not become a teacher to pay off your student loans. Now, I feel like people who become teachers don't become teachers to have loans, but they're the best. There is 4 big components I want to talk to about public self forgiveness. And they're all super important. Some things, if you walk away with anything, just walk away with these 4 components. They require 30 hours or more. You need to work full time, so 30 hours or more, or whatever your employer may deem as full time to them. For public service, right? So it's either an approved 501c3 nonprofit or an approved government organization. There's many tools to find out if you're at the right employer or it's approved. Loans must be a part of the federal direct loan program, which is via the U.S. Department of Education. Sorry, someone just came in. And so one thing I want to point out there, as you'll see here, as I listed, so loans from the Federal Family Education Loan Program and the Perkins loan do not qualify, as well as all private loans are not going to qualify for this, as I said. One thing I want to point out here, as well as enrollment in an income-driven repayment plan, as I reviewed briefly a month ago, is absolutely mandatory in order for it to count, because you're going to be required to make 10 years of monthly payments. So 120 on-time monthly payments. And so if your 120 monthly payments were all on an IDR plan, you're fine. But if you paid any before you switched to an income-driven repayment plan, they unfortunately do not count for those 120. So if you're thinking about going this way, or you're pretty certain, change first, like to make sure you're like, we want to make sure every payment counts. But I also say that with, this may not be for you, right? Were you planning to go in to work for a for-profit company at any point? Were you thinking about taking an extended leave of absence to travel the world? Are you expecting raises that may make you ineligible? Like, suddenly walking away with huge six figures, right? So if any of those questions apply, do definitely think twice about this, because this program, as it requires you to work for a nonprofit for a total of 10 years, while it may not, it doesn't have to be consecutive, right? But it can be, and it can be also be for multiple employers. Going this route generally makes absolutely no sense if you aren't already considering a professional career of it, because in the end, you will end up paying more potentially if you don't finish your commitment because of those income-driven repayment plans. I hope that makes sense. So I see some questions here. Elena, that's actually a good question regarding, does your savings, could showing a good transcript help with the refunds? I don't have personal experience with that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But no, I had something to look into. But if I had to just go off my gut, I don't think so. Because the credit is just, they really want to go off of anytime you refinance anything, not just student loans, they need to access your ability to pay off that debt. And so while having a great transcript is phenomenal, it doesn't show the lender your ability to pay off debt consistently and reliably. But it's something to look into. I don't think, I could be absolutely wrong and I would own it. Yeah, so there is some places, I wouldn't say there's no place you can just put your name in and see every loan. But if you don't check with your own Berkshire office, or if you check with if you go to the student aid website, actually I think I had the link here in my notes. Yes. This is a good place to find resources that have, because if there is no way to really search for it, you can actually go to the different providers and it will find, you will be able to kind of connect with them there. They list all of them. So one second, I'm posting here in the chat. Okay, so we're gonna actually have a little fun activity now, because if I'm tired of hearing myself talk, I'm sure you may use a slight break from hearing me talk. So let's take a break from my monologue. But before that, we're gonna do some math, right? So debt to income ratio, DTI. I think it's gonna answer actually a lot of questions I think a couple of us have had already, but this is also more commonly referred to as DTI, debt to income, DTI. It's typically the red-headed stepchild of the flashy financial numbers. Nothing against red-headed stepchildren, just a phrase. But we give credit scores a lot of airtime, but rarely do we consider the other big factor that can affect how lenders may view you. How much debt you have relative to your income. Lenders care about DTI because it gives them a better sense as to whether or not you're living beyond your means and how much debt you can afford to take on. So in regards to that refinance question, that is kind of where they're coming from. You could be up to your ears in debt and still have a killer credit score because you have a long history with no negative marks or missed bill payments. Credit score doesn't always show the full picture. Just consider DTI the inverse of your credit score. The lower the better with DTI, while it's the higher the better with your credit score, right? So kind of inverse relationship. So with this, I'm going to apologize to anyone in advance who was not ready to get real with themselves quite yet. I want to take a few minutes here to give you all a chance, after I explain, to walk away with an accurate-ish DTI. I say accurate-ish because I'm aware many of you probably didn't come here with the exact numbers of dollars you're required monthly to pay towards your debt, but humor me and give me your best guesstimate. I guess you can do this more accurately tomorrow and see how close you were. Make it a game. Okay, so we're gonna take any minimum requirements, not automated payments that you may have that are above the minimum, just the minimum payment required on a monthly basis. We're also gonna take how much you pay on rent or your mortgage, if you have one. Even though rent is not necessarily a debt, it is still used to help calculate DTI because lenders want to see your current capacity for your living expenses. Then I want you to add your gross income. This income before taxes and benefit deductions if you're a W-2 employee. If you are self-employed, freelancer, or work as an independent contractor, if you receive a 1099, it's going to be just what you receive each month. Sorry, I was reading in the chat here. If you have inconsistent income or it varies a lot each month, I want you to take the average of like the last 3 months. If you don't have any income right now, don't worry, you get to play too. I am going to assume you're looking for work. And I know we all, when we're looking for work, we have kind of like an ideal salary range in our head, a realistic one when we're job hunting. Typically within that range, we have the salary realistic number you have thought over a million times that you would love this fake employer to potentially offer you. However, within that same range, I know we all have a number we hope they go higher than because it just barely meets what you think is acceptable. It's the kind of number you will actively have no issue countering with a counter offer, but will also accept when they tell you no to your counter. So I want you to take those two numbers and I want you to find the average of them. And that's going to be your fake gross income number for this activity. If anything, this might help motivate your inner fierce badass to like up your worth when setting your salary expectations in your hunt, right? If your fake number is below the recommended, you might want to up your income there requests. So if everyone, if we have kind of these two guesstimates, right? You have your total monthly required debt payments and your monthly gross payments. I then want you to divide the debt payments against your gross monthly income. From there, hit that multiplication number on your calculator, phone, whatever. You should find a percentage. You can take a look at the fake example I have here on the presentation. It includes minimums on student loans, auto loan, and rent, but it can also include the minimum car payment you have for your credit card, whether it's $35 or $40, or any potential medical or health debts you have to pay each month. It just doesn't have to be, relegated to these three things here. So if you can tell, right? So if this person of this fake income gets paid twice a month at a gross amount of $1,750, then you would have them at about $3,500 a month. So, if your employee, one thing I will note, if your employer pays you biweekly, that means you have 26 pay periods. So twice a year, you get an extra fun paycheck like this month, which is awesome, but for this exercise isn't so awesome. So if you get paid bi-weekly, I want you to take that paycheck number and hit that multiplication button again and hit 2.1. We won't be 100% accurate, but as close as my East Coast public school education will get us. Don't worry, I'm still proud of my education, but definitely take the long, complicated way for all math things. But what I would say is like, that's what I would approach if you had bi-weekly things. But as you can see, getting back to this exercise, the DTI for this person or fake example came out to 33.42%, which is pretty good, right? The ideal DTI, as I've listed here, is below 36%. And is general rule of thumb what lenders are looking for. Obviously, if you're above 36, it's not the end of the world. They're not immediately going to say no, take them away. But it will, when you're working with lenders, it will require further in-depth review to see why that's number. They're going to do a little closer look to see like, why are you above 36? Is it a special circumstance? What is actually happening? Basically, you'll have some explaining to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit less now. I want to give you a moment to focus. Please feel free to drop a question in the chat if you need clarity on this, or if you're below 36 and it's a great surprise and want a virtual high five. Hey, Prasad, for the people who didn't have income, did my explanation make sense about how to make fake income? Anyone heard of DTI before today? Or heard of it and had no idea what it meant? Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to kind of check in with yourself on debt, like especially if you're thinking on taking another on a debt, not like I said, debt doesn't need to be bad, but if you're, questioning whether you should take on more, right? Even though this is meant for lenders, this can also be used as like a practical life guide for yourself. So I think I had a question a while back about for mortgages and buying a house, like credit score and stuff like that. DTI, when it comes to lending, it's important. Like they're going to look at it, but they're going to look at DTI more for mortgages, or a version of a different calculation that's very similar, whether it's, but it will involve your debt in relation to how much money you have coming in. All right, moving on for here. Well, we'll definitely circle back if we have any further questions, but so full disclosure, my partner helps edit my PowerPoints as she has a better eye for detail. And she felt attacked by this because 4 out of 5 resonated with her. So she came to the obviously logical conclusion that I based this off her, which was not the case, but anyway, but there's that common phrase, right? That there's only 2 certain things in life, death and taxes. But yet while we're always questioning our mortality, we never discuss taxes. I also want to do my due diligence and obviously for the recording to put an extra disclaimer that I am not a tax advisor. However, in my work, I have a general high to mid-level understanding of the functionality of taxes. So the information coming through on the following slides is not advice, okay? Everybody's tax situation is different. So some things might be applicable to you and not to others. So, treat it as a general education and please utilize your closest Google machine advisor for a more detailed, in-depth explanation of some of these tax credit tips or deductions and how they can best be utilized. So I realize our tax understanding ability within the Zoom is going to be a little varied. I'm sure if I say, do you know what a 1040 form is? Some of you will have a blank stare, but then I'm sure there are some here that could do my taxes better than I do them. So, to those people, bear with me. I really wish I had someone explain this to me in this format when I learned. What you see here is a very, very simplified flow chart of how your tax filing works. I have been filing taxes like via TurboTax since I was like 18. And my grandmother, who was the one who forced me to start filing taxes at 18, was also a CPA. And it wasn't until a handful of years later that when I was studying for my CFP exam that I saw an illustration very similar to that. Like I actually tried to mirror it right now with this, that it all clicked, right? So I'm hoping it may work for you the way it worked for me, because nothing else did. And so how this works, you already have your monthly gross income number, or a fake one or so. When starting taxes, we take that annual number, right? You have a monthly one, we want to take the annual. That's our known. If this is an algebra pop quiz, that's the given. The tax refund or the tax owed that you see at the bottom, that is that always elusive X we're trying to solve for. And everything in between are known and unknown friends that we need to figure out and connect to before finding X. I'll go into a little bit of detail of what many of these friends and foes are, and especially what they mean, and give actual examples, because this is right now I realize this looks very like abstract, but I want to finish up the part to understand how this like logistically works. Because this is like if you file with HR Block or TurboTax, it's not going to show up there. You're just clicking buttons, but you don't know why you're clicking these buttons. Gross income is the highest amount it gets. It's good because the band-aids off, can't get much worse. From there, we're subject to above the line adjustments to income. So you may have heard those quotes, might not know what they're talking about, but above the line deductions, that's what they're talking about here. And so this number, right, subtracting adjustments to income gets us to our adjusted gross income, also known as AGI. In my opinion, this number is way more cool. This number will be a lot more useful, and it's going to be helpful for the rest of your financial life. It's used to determine eligibility for tax incentives and credits and other different deductions that you may qualify. I'll note a little bit of those on the next page, but and they also can help you out with your state income tax. From AGI, we're subject to what we call below the line deductions, aka our itemized or standard deductions. I will admit, if you're under the age of 30 or have limited assets, these deductions are not as sexy, but still important. Okay, and everything here helps, but it might help others a little bit more than you. From there, you'll get your taxable income. We're getting closer to the real number, but isn't a number you should be scared of quite yet. It's used to calculate your tax liability. So far down, as you see far down the chart, it's like the way I like to compare it is when you let your phone charge to 90%, but it ends up needing that extra 10% later on, and you probably should have let it charge the full 100%, kind of sort of the same thing. So don't necessarily get upset at the taxable income. It's going to be similar, but there could be stuff that change it away. So we take that and we multiply by the effective tax rate. Effective tax rate is the average of all the tax brackets the IRS uses for income tiers. If you have absolutely no idea what that sentence means, I will go into a little bit more detail soon, I promise. When you take all your taxable income and multiply it by your own effective tax rate, you'll get your tentative tax, right? We're getting closer. This number's getting a little bit more realistic now. So from there, we can then subtract any applicable tax credits that we qualify for, or total payments we already paid to Uncle Sam, such as withholding on your W-2 income, or from your weekly paycheck, or quarterly tax payments you pay as a self-employed individual over the year. And then we add back in, though, it's not all just flowers, unfortunately. We have to add back in some taxes that are due from unreported income, such as 1099s. Let's say if, over the pandemic, you decided to drive for DoorDash randomly for a month. I know, I keep calling DoorDash. I ride hard for them, and made over $600 randomly for a month, right? So $600 is when they would have to report you as they gave you a 1099. And so because nothing was withheld, this is the time for you to pay up into Social Security and all that, right? Because you got to pay taxes somehow. So after all that, you either have a nice refund coming to you, or you got a little bit of money you owe and you got to pay up. But one thing I want to point out, while refunds are great, I love them, they're great. I'm not saying don't hate on them. I just want to put an extra thing in here. It's not free money you're getting. It's simply a return of your overpayment in taxes from the previous year. So it's your money just given back to you in a lump sum. So while this is unrelated to this current topic, right? If we're connecting it back to the overall theme of this workshop today, treat it like you worked for it and use it wisely, because you did work for it. But of course, treat yourself a smidge, but have a plan for it if you are getting a refund, because it is your money. It's not like I heard you got the IRS. That was your money that they took from you, too much. So then what did all that mean? And I'll do my best. So when we're looking at that gross income number, right, the sum of all income, and it's not just your W-2 income or your 1099 income. It could be interest, certain scholarships and grants. If you are in real estate, it could be rents paid to you, dividends, business profits. Sorry, okay. And then from there, we're going to do subtractions to income, right? That above the line I was referring to. What does that mean? So generally, for example, remember that student loan interest I referred to, up to $2,500, right? That would apply here. So let's say, but there is some income phase out limits that you have to be worried about. I realize there's a lot of info here, so that's why I'm talking about it. And so there's so much I want to talk about taxes, apparently. But $2,500, the reason, so let's say you had a gross income of $80,000, right? And you qualified for the honestly, I'm not going to give that example because that might be close to the income phase out limit. So let's do $60,000 as a goal. So if you did 2,500, right, you would take that 60, you would be like, hey, IRS, I have $60,000 I made gross this year, but I know I paid 2,500 in interest. So we're going to subtract that from that gross number, and that helps get to our AGI. At the same time, if you work for an employer that has a 401k or 403b, any pre-tax dollar amount that you put into your retirement to pay for your future self, also you can take a tax deduction this year. Same thing with traditional IRAs. Same if you don't have an employer sponsored plan and had earned income elsewhere. And then health savings accounts, if you have them. Another fun one, educator expense deduction. So if you were a teacher or worked in the education world and you had unreimbursed expenses up to $250 for some reason, buy little supplies. I feel like, teachers sometimes put more work into it than they actually get paid. So this is a way to get a little bit of that back for you. And then qualified tuitions and fees, like if you're paying out of pocket. And if this is only applicable if you don't get any tax credits down the line for it. You can't like get a credit like, hey, here's some money to help you out, and then also go ahead and get the interest, to get the deduction as well for the same expense. It can be for separate expenses, but if they come to audit you, you have to be able to show those two different expenses. All right, itemized. So I'm going to be quick with the itemized and the standard deduction because for most people, like I said, the standard deduction amounts tend to favor younger people. With middle to lower salaries and even middle to upper, because these are below the line deductions. They really only benefit people who have assets. Like if you have a house, right, then you pay mortgage interest, that would be useful for itemized. But otherwise, there's this thing called a standard deduction. So for the year 2020, this previous tax year, the standard deduction, even if you're just single, you'll get $12,400 deduction just right off the bat. That's going to just be there. Just you showing up to do your taxes, you get that standard deductions. And so the reason why this doesn't always benefit, our generation or middle lower rate is because we don't have houses. We're not making huge charity donations. We don't necessarily have huge non-reimbursed medical expenses that would exceed that 12,400 number. That makes sense to itemize it, right? And so I'm not saying there won't be people who do, but for the most population, right, this tends to favor older, more established financial pictures that have assets that they can strategically deduct. And then finally, getting back down into that taxable income. It's used to calculate liability. So I briefly talked about effective tax rate. So that comes from the US having 7 federal tax brackets right now. Okay, it's actually as simple as ever be. It will probably be like this at least through 2025. You pay a little tax in each bracket as your income funnels through different levels, right? Through those 7. The last 2 or 3, right, they're going to be really high, like 6 figures types of things. So we call these marginal progressive tax rates. So that effective tax rate is the average, right, of how much you had contributed in each of those different. So for example, there's 12, 24, 22, 24, I think 32, 35, 30, or 35, 37. I know 37 is one of the ones in the end, but right. So most Americans, working Americans are going to fall under, or people working in the US are going to fall under 24%, right? That's just where, usually if you make more than like 160,000, that's when you would push up into a higher bracket. And so that's where that effective tax rate comes from. And then finally, just the last point I hear, and I talked about tax credits. Certain tax credits you might want to look at, you might qualify, right? So the American Opportunity Credit, that's an undergraduate credit for getting some reimbursement of your taxes, or the Lifetime Learning Credit, which is for undergrad, graduates, continuing education, like if you take just random classes at a community college, and that's up to $2,000 credit. There is a phase out limit there as well. So that's why I said this isn't always applicable, especially if you're working and earning a salary right now. Because I believe for 2020, it's 79,000 or lower for like a single file individual, right? So, it can be helpful for someone who's still maybe working part-time while they go to graduate school. Another popular one is the Earned Income Tax Credit, right? Helps reduce tax bill for low to moderate income working families. So that's just, that's how those credits applied when I was looking at that spreadsheet towards right before you got towards that final tax refund or owed. That's those final subtractions we're doing. And so if you do TurboTax, that's why they'll just like drop in your face, like, do you qualify for this credit or that credit? It's like Oprah giving out credits everywhere. Like that's why we look into them and make sure, when you're making decisions, like think about, will I be able to claim this? Do I make too much? Do I make little? So it's something to research and look into because it's going to be different for everyone. Right. I'm trying to give some time inference. I want to make sure you guys have time for second dinner. So I want to make sure we get to some tax best practices. So yeah, some of these are going to seem a little ridiculous. So, when you're getting that refund that's due to you, right? Because that's your money, have a plan, right? Once you set your mind on it or, say it into existence, it's a lot easier to follow through on. A big part of why I was able to pay off my student loans at the rate I did was because I was fortunate to work for a company that paid out small quarterly bonuses because, we had a lower base salary, but we had like technically an extra paycheck coming every quarter. I knew in my head, everyone was going to a student loan payment. And so because of that, my friends were like, let's go to happy hours and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even really like to drink, but also it's expensive. I'd rather buy peanut butter. But like at the same time, because I already had that plan in my head, I was able to kind of like not let my circle of influence kind of affect me to make a bad choice, right? I already knew this is the rule. Don't forget to set your return. I'm sorry, don't forget to sign your return. I'm absolutely for real here. Like one of my best friends who actually works in the same industry as me forgot to sign her return last year. And she had to file a 1040X, which is an amended tax form. It is the worst process because it's still archaic and you have to submit it by paper. So you have to go to the post office. Most of our generation doesn't know how that works. And it's just a lot. Most of us don't even have printers to print out our tax form. And so, between all that, just sign your return and don't worry about it. Whether you use TurboTax or H&R Block, don't forget the password. You do this once a year to file your taxes. The last thing you want to worry about when finally getting down to do the thing is trying to remember your login. Like just write it somewhere securely that you'll be able to, or pick something you'll remember. So if you're one who's self-employed or freelancing, you need to be on top of your taxes. The general rule of thumb is save 20 to 30% of your taxes. So any profit that you have coming in, when we go back to those bank accounts that I had, if you have one for your business, make sure you have like a tax account that is not easy to touch, similar to how I went about the emergency fund. If you're, let's say if your adjusted income gross, that AGI number, if it's below $72,000, as I noted here, you can, the IRS has this partner of file partners thing where it's a nonprofit public-private partnership where you can actually file a free return. That can be found on the IRS.gov website. I want to say that this, I don't know if you experience, like, I know for me, I do it a lot because of my occupation, but the IRS website is a good place to get familiar with. It's not as scary as it seems. And any information you ever have about your taxes is on there. So it's always better to get information from the people who you're going to be working with than actually like, necessarily Google. Because if you notice, if you put a lot of tax questions in Google, what's the first thing that pops up? The IRS website. So don't be scared of it. It's not as, while their 1040X amended X form is archaic, everything else is, their website is better. One thing I like to recommend, so I said don't discard your documents after filing. So general rule of thumb, 3 years at least, keep them organized. If you're going to buy a printer, maybe invest in a file cabinet too. Just it's something that's keep them organized. Like 3 is the minimum. It could be potentially up to 7 years too. There's no harm in doing that. But like if we're looking at 15 years, maybe not. There's no benefit there. You can throw the ones from the 90s out or early 2000s. If you, with 401ks, 403bs, if you have a traditional IRA, take advantage of them. Like I said during that brief a moment ago, it helps with tax deductions and also helps your future self. Just because even if your employer doesn't give you a match, help yourself, help you. And then for my W-2 1099 employees, keep track of them. Know what forms you have coming to you, because it's easier to know what's to expect come January and February every year when you get ready to prepare your taxes. The last thing you want to do is file your return and then someone, a former employer you worked for like a month or someone you did a little bit of contract work you forgot about just drops in your mail at 1099, and now you have to file that 1040X, right? Because it's going to the IRS. You have to report it. Like, you know, it's like two friends showing up to meet someone and only one friend and the other one doesn't come, but they're expecting them and they never come. No show, you get in trouble. So make sure you definitely, you want to always report. What do I mean by it's always better to file than, it's always better to file or fail to pay than file to fail. Sorry, it's always a tongue twister. Always better to file and fail to pay than fail to file. So what I mean by this, and this doesn't count, so if you file or extend as a, you know, just not avoiding the problem and just like, I'm not going to do it, I'm like, you know, protesting taxes, the penalty's higher. It's easy, it's better to, you know, either extend or file and then fail to pay, not have the ability to pay your liability, than it is to just like avoid the problem altogether. What does that mean? Like, so it's either, you know, say you forget to pay, right? Or you can't pay and but you filed, right? It's a 0.05% penalty per month as opposed to 5% by just not doing this thing. So when you're looking at long-term penalties of that, always file or extend appropriately. And just, you know, if you extend, doesn't mean you don't pay. I want to put that out there. Like, you know, you could still fail to pay and be okay and have a penalty, but you still are expected to pay when you extend your taxes. So those are my best practices. Some stuff I wish I had, you know, when I was 22. Some things I learned the hard way. So quick takeaways here for tips. And one thing I wanted to touch on, right, because we're in a unique situation with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and there's been a lot of changes. How do they impact this in this conversation? So speaking of taxes, the IRS actually extended filing until May 17th for federal taxes, not necessarily state taxes, but I did do some headway here. And so Oregon Department of Revenue and also California have fallen in line and also are extending out to May 17th to be in line with the federal. But I had to really look into any other states. So if you're a part of this, you might want to do a little bit of research there. Federal student loan flexibilities, right? So that forbearance we're hearing about was extended through September 30th of 2021. This is for all federal loans. And actually, let me reread that because I wrote that here. So all borrowers with federal loans that went through the education department, right, will have their payments suspended. So without interest. So this is very rare. We occasionally have gotten forbearances in the past. You can ask for it, but interest still accrues, you know, through that. And so this is different, as meaning there's no interest. So if you elect to make a payment right now, it's going straight against principal. So you're not necessarily beating up a hill right now, like interest. You'll have some interest if you owed it already, but you're going to hit some principal if you're consistent. So for people that can and aren't expecting any forgiveness options or anything like that, I'm encouraging, if you have extra cash flow, make the minimum payment. And so I'm gonna with that. And so, you know, just do what you can. And then from there, a couple quick other tidbits. You can contribute to your IRA or your for the remainder of the year as well through that May of 2021. And then also, one thing is we have the ability to do $300 for qualifying charitable donations for above the line deductions. And then finally, if you filed for any type of unemployment income, the most recent bill approved does make the first $10,200 of your 2020 unemployment income tax-free, at least for federal taxes. So please confirm your states. Okay, I'm getting through here, okay, I promise. I am some practical tips here, but I am sorry, we're not gonna have time to go over this, but I just wanna be one thing clear, be clear about your values. Find them and stick to them or adapt and grow. Final thing, and this, so don't worry if you don't get to write this down or anything. I did put most of this in that follow-up that we're gonna send out to you. So it's okay. And we discussed a handful of these already. All right, so we are gonna open, I know we went over, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna actually, I'll take a couple questions for people who've sticked around. Feel free to put in the chat or to speak up. You can unmute yourself. If you need to leave, absolutely, I won't be offended, but I really want to, we promised a Q&A, and I wanted to go ahead and give you that option.
Hi, my name is Emily. I have
Yeah.
a question that I think will probably be unanswerable, but I'd love like resources for where to find the answer. Um, I moved from Portland to Los Angeles like 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And I kept my job in Portland working remote, but didn't tell my boss that I moved. And so now I'm in the situation where I need to file taxes across 2 states. And I guess I'm kind of curious, like what will happen? Like what will my workplace know after I file taxes?
That's a good question. I would definitely look into this. So are you a 1099 or W-2 employee?
W2.
Okay, so W-2. So one, they could potentially, because they're going to file a report. So there's always a chance. And so I would definitely look into this.
Mhm.
But when you're coming to your states, it wouldn't affect that. But it's the federal I'm worried about because it's a centralized location.
Okay.
Is there were you part of the crowd that was like, had the chance to work remotely and move and you had to stay in state? I would double check. There's a good chance, but if you work for a big company, and there's potential that it just kind of flows through. But yeah, when they report what they paid you,
Mhm.
right, they're gonna kind of get that alert. And so
Okay.
I would look into it. I wouldn't freak out just yet, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But
I
yeah,
mean, I
it's a
guess
little
the
bit.
answer then is that I have to quit this job before
Yeah.
I file taxes. But
Well,
do you know like where I would go to look into it?
yeah. I would try maybe honestly the IRS just to see that
Mhm.
website I mentioned. If you want to go through their search bar is pretty good. So if you just put like multiple tax returns, because I know for me when I moved across the country, I had like all these
Mhm.
questions because I had 2 state tax returns that year. And so if you just want to go through the IRS, that's a good place to start because they're the ones who are gonna get you in trouble. Not intentionally, but they're the ones. But also like I would, keep getting money. Like, obviously, if it's going to lead to you quitting your job, like maybe wait for the problem to actually arrive at your front door before you make any rash decisions.
Right. I mean, I would definitely like apply out and but it's been kind of like the job is boring, but the health insurance is fantastic. So I'm kind of like keeping it until I'm like done with the whole situation. But
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
and
it's
always like
definitely
wait for the
it's
problem to
lasting longer
come
than anticipated.
to you. Yeah, wait for the problem to come to you. Do your research. Still
Mhm.
file your taxes at the end of the day, right? But like also, just don't make any rash decisions before you file
Okay.
your taxes.
Now
Right. I think
have-
we had.
We have
Sorry.
a question in chat. How do you improve your credit score when the main problem is that it's too young?
So that besides just making good timely payments, keeping your utilization below 30%, making sure, it just takes time, right? Everyone has it, especially, but it gets better. And that's actually, out of the things that weighs your credit score down, that's one of the lower things. It has like a medium impact as opposed to like a missed payment is like higher impact, right? Or someone looking into your account, like if someone runs a credit port on you, that might be a little higher weighted than actual like just due to credit history. And that just, it's kind of like building work experience. You just got to endure, unfortunately, but do everything else the best of your ability. I wanted to ask about good investing. So, I'll say something quick about investing. And so generally, if you have your basics down, such as, even if you're still in school, even though you don't have your debt paid off, but you have a plan to at least conquer your debt and, and you have a solid emergency fund and you don't really have the option to do any type of retirement planning yet, that's a good time to then start thinking about investing extra savings. And then a good way to do it, I can't give any advice here, but I would say, there's nothing wrong with index funds. They are passive. They don't try to do too much, and they're kind of like a set it and forget it kind of situation. So, when it comes to index funds or any type of mutual fund, you generally don't do any type of active trading. You don't just like buy and sell, right? You generally, anytime you invest into a mutual fund, you kind of just want to automate it, and you're in there for the long run. When I say long run, like more than 3 years. You're not trying to like, sell in 6 months. That it doesn't make sense at that point. You're better off in just keeping in your savings account and getting a little bit of interest. Did I miss any other questions by chance? Did you guys catch?
I think those were all the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining everyone, and big thank you, Sam, for this amazing presentation. Before you go, just note that we'll be sending out a survey tomorrow to gather your feedback on tonight's event. We always appreciate your thoughtful feedback and ideas for future events as well. And then stay tuned for reunions in Alumni College, which will be hosted virtually in June. Alumni College will focus on climate change this year, and reunions will offer a ton of things, from our annual talent show to class gatherings to faculty talk by Poncho Savory. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.